Alleluia. Om Mani Padme Om. Allah Satnam.
Welcome. You're watching Harmony and Diversity. And today we're speaking with Tommy Canning, a painter of sacred art from Scotland. This is the second time we're speaking to you, Tommy. Welcome back to Australia.
Thanks, Norm. Good to be back.
And you came for a particular conference, didn't you?
Yeah, I was invited to the Oceania Congress on Divine Mercy in Auckland this year. The last one was in Samoa, I think around 2013. So this time it was in Auckland, in New Zealand, and I was invited as part of a number of speakers from international speakers from all over the world to take part in the Congress, which was about 10 days. We went out all around the various deaneries in the diocese there, and culminating with the final weekend, and it included the Cardinal Maffei from Tonga, the new cardinal designated by Pope Francis in, I think, last year, and there was the Archbishop of Fiji, and Samoa Archbishop Alapati came. He was in attendance as well, and many priests from surrounding parts of the world, in Australia and from New Zealand. So very well attended event. Mainly the islanders, many island people from Samoa, Tonga, Fiji, Papua New Guinea, very well represented, and it was a privilege and always an honour for me to be at something like that.
We'll come back to that because there's a big story there, I can feel it. But there's a basic story for you, and this is the sacred art.
Yeah.
Can we start, because that's not something that sort of just drops out of the sky on you, it's something that evolves. How did you start with it? Did you draw and paint as a child, or?
Yeah, just from early ages I was always noticeably very artistically inclined. I always had a keen eye for drawing, and was always seen with a pencil or a pen in some corner on a tabletop, drawing away.
Right.
And at school that was reflected as well. I was always very skillful in art, probably a little bit beyond the years. When other kids would get you to draw things for them and just marvel at the amazing craftsmanship at a very young age, which looked to them like something extraordinary. So would draw their favourite characters and from TV shows and comic books and you name it. So it was something that was there from the beginning, and just developed more and more as I grew older, and became clear to me that's really was my great love, was for drawing, and later on painting, as I experimented and developed as I matured into my teenage years. And so by the time of 14, 15, it was very much clear to me that I wanted to be a comic book artist. I was immersed in that world of comic books and had a vast collection, and really was steeped in that whole world. So that was the direction I wanted to go in from an early age.
And the comic book world and the kids asking you to draw particular characters, that's all mind-driven stuff and vision-driven and etc.
Yeah.
The move across into sacred art, which I presume, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, comes from here.
Yep.
What's that transition feel like?
Yeah, it's interesting, and the more I look back on it, it's always fascinating to me. The older I get, the more fascinated I become by my own particular journey. I was born and raised Catholic, grew up and received all the sacraments, Catholic education from beginning till end, and grew up in the 1970s and 80s. I was in high school in the 1980s, and became probably very typical of many of the age group I was part of. And really the faith became just a sort of going through the motions. That wasn't the most important thing to me. It was just part of the, you were Catholic, you went to Mass, you did those things. It wasn't really something I was deeply into in any level at all. and probably could easily have just have drifted away from it, as many of my peers did and have done, and continue to do. So I was nothing special. I was just the average kid, average Catholic kid in Scotland, in the west of Scotland, and the faith was just there, but it was nothing, too spectacular for me. So all your interests were all in all other things, sports and the comic books and all of that. Typical boy in that sense. But then by the age of 19, I had two comic books published by a major publisher on soccer teams in Scotland and England, and then went on a holiday. It was a holiday to Rome for 1 week with my mother and two brothers. And I wasn't really prepared for what I experienced, what was waiting for me when I got there. I knew would see some beautiful art in churches, but didn't expect it to impact me on a much deeper level, not only as an artist but also as a Catholic. And it really the thing that came home to me very loud and clear was when you look at all this beauty and the majesty and the magnificence of the great art and architecture and that had stood for centuries. It really came home to me as a young impressionable artist and as a Catholic. If this isn't real, if God, religion, if this is just made up, somebody just invented all this, or it isn't real, where does all this beauty come from? What can inspire that? And so that conviction, only God can inspire such magnificence, such beauty, and really awaken within me to really sort of sit up, take notice, and take this thing seriously that I'd been raised in from a child. So that was a kind of a metanoia, sort of awakening and turning around to sort of really look at this much more seriously and mature as a Catholic, which I had very basically little to no real understanding of many of the aspects of the faith. You just accepted things as it was handed down to you, but really looking back, I didn't really have a whole lot of equipment to facilitate a real appreciation for what the church has. So that began that journey, and then a love affair with sacred art, with Catholic art, as the church has presented down the centuries through these magnificent churches and depictions. The great artists of Michelangelo and Caravaggio, Rembrandt, Raphael, Giotto, Fra Angelico, all the great masters who
did their painting back in time, which we're out of for a moment.
Sure.
We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and we're speaking with Tommy Canning, painter of sacred art. Tommy, you just ran through a list of some of the greatest artists in the world, and you were inspired by their work and the sculpturing and the buildings, the whole of that. When you came back from there, was there something different in you? Did you feel different about what you were doing? Yeah,
it was sort of created a very restless, it agitated me probably just from away from where I was at previously, and just awakened within me a sense of there was a whole lot more out there that I hadn't really respected and understood and appreciated until I had actually encountered it or been affected by it, and the great heritage and patrimony that we have in the sacred art and the Catholic Church. So when I saw all of that and experienced that its transcendental power that it has, and began to take the matters of the faith much more seriously, and consider those the big questions: why am I here? What is the purpose? All that.
Yes.
Those big existential questions that we all ask ourselves at some point on that journey through the pilgrimage of life. And to me, that was the sort of turning point, and it began that restlessness that I wanted to really explore this aspect of art as a powerful tool and expression, much more than what I'd previously been interested in. The previous passions and interests and fascinations I had in artistic subject matter and the world of comic books and the realms of fantasy and science fiction. As good as they are, they're a great escape from the mundane drudge of life and all of that, and can be very profound and have great pathos and depth to it as well. But they became much more pale in comparison with the subject matter of the divinity of Christ, the Church, the Blessed Mother, all the great imagery that I had been exposed to in that one visit to Rome. And so that then began to become a reorientation away from that. Not that it was necessarily evil and wicked and bad, it was just, it seemed less prescient to me than this. This has been enduring for centuries and has stood the test of time and has harkens back to ancient times, and there's that sense of history and tradition and continuity, and all of that just really resonated within me, that I wanted to tap into that and to see where it would take me and how I would progress as an artist, and that really began that process from there.
It sounds like a calling. It was in hindsight I can recognise it as such now, but at the time it was just I was just seeing and reacting to what was happening to me personally and what I observed around me, and just went with that. But looking back, I can clearly see that the Lord was sort of nudging me along and taking me by the hand and taking me to the next stage, is unbeknownst to me. And did you have to make sacrifices?
Certainly. I mean, again, it wasn't something I was consciously aware of at the time. That was completely not even consideration. But you slowly learn that it's a new way of seeing. It's a different way of looking at everything. You approach the subject completely, but that all was very gradual and part of as I developed and matured spiritually as well, and grew in my own faith. And as we all do, we have the peaks and troughs, and we fall, we get back up, and we struggle with all our faults and defects. That we're all sinners, and I'm just like everybody else. I have to go to confession and and start all over. So you go through all those struggles and trials, like many people do. But at the same time, I was always progressing and developing and learning and understanding more. And then as time went on, just along that journey, I came into possession of a small leaflet on the devotion to the Divine Mercy as part of that process of learning more about the Church and these great treasures we have in the form of the many devotions, and tracing the origins of these things and reading into them. That then had a profound effect on me, especially with Divine Mercy. The hook that drew me in was the fact that our Lord had appeared to this Polish nun in the 1930s, and he asked her to have a painting done of this vision that she was seeing as he was appearing to her. He says, paint an image according to the pattern you see, with the signature, Jesus, I trust in you. And when I read those words in the little leaflet the first time, it really sort of resonated in me, almost as if the Lord was saying to me, paint a picture. It was almost as if I was reading over. He wasn't just talking to this nun back in 1931, he's talking to me now, saying, this is where I'm leading you. You've got a talent, I've given you this gift. Use it for something that's going to give him more glory and him honour and draw souls to him. And that was the sort of entry point to really seriously think about dedicating this skill, this gift, to giving God greater honour and glory. And that was the...
So it sounds, you're talking almost as though you've been ordained as a priest. You've been ordained as a sacred painting priest. There's got a strong feel to it. Do you sort of identify with that?
In a loose sense, very much in the sense of that we're all by virtue of our baptism called to be faithful to whatever vocation God has called. He's called every one of us, whether we're married, single, priest, to be faithful to that. And He's given the gifts, and He's given us He's equipped us with the graces to fulfill that. I mean, when you look at art in terms of religious subject matter, you do have a sense of that there comes with that a great responsibility as well, to impart what has been revealed and be faithful to that, then not to just fly off on our own sort of flights of fancy and invent things to suit our own, whims, or you've really got to put yourself into what is the mind of the church, and try and look at ways that you can bring a fresh insight into a truth, a theological truth. And that's what Sacred Art does. It can do when it's at its most effective.
One of the realities, I'm sorry, Tommy, is the fact that time
is running.
Well. That's not theological, it's a fact.
Just a reality.
We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and we're speaking with Tommy Canning. He's a painter of sacred art. Tommy, you were talking about inspiration, and you do get commissions which then describe what they want. But what about paintings that generate within you? How does that arise? You, as you were saying, you try not to divert off into a sense of this, I'll create this or I'll create that. You're actually listening to your heart. What's it feel like?
It's just, I suppose, God uses the ordinary things that He's given us. He's given us an imagination. He's given us truth. He's given us objective reality, and all we have the commandments, we have the precepts of the church, the teaching of the church, the perennial magisterium. And as we enter into that, and the more we internalise that and try to understand it and appreciate the richness and the beauty and the liberating truth, that we are free, we're not slaves to sin anymore, that the truth sets us free. All those ideas which the Gospels convey, and we internalise that and we meditate on that. It comes out in ways that you start to imagine things that you have read and written or seen written about the saints, about the lives of the saints, about Christ Himself and the Gospels, and it's just a matter of trying to visualise that scene very much in the way you see a movie like The Passion of the Christ, the Mel Gibson movie, which took the Gospels of the Gospel narratives of the Passion and supplemented that with some details from various mystics that were approved by the church, like Catherine Emmerich, Mary of Agreda, to name just two, who supplied little details that you used and facilitated what's not spoken explicitly in the Gospels, but is not unreasonable to speculate on, and to use a certain amount of artistic license, which doesn't depart from the essence or the sense of the message or the truth it contains. And so within that sandbox, I look at it as more of like a sandbox. It's not a limit. It's like a sandbox. You can have all the fun and play within that confine, but you have to really keep it faithful to the story. It's like if you do an adaptation of any famous novel and you just completely invent things in the film if that's not in the book, it's a completely different subject, it's a different work. You have to be faithful to what did the author mean or intend by that. So it's the same for sacred art, whichever form, whether it's music, film, painted image or a sculpted image. You're trying to be consistent with what has always been believed and understood. And within that, there's a lot of freedom as well. You can be very creative and very inventive within that limitation. But it's something that you develop and you hone, and like everything else, it's perfected with practice. And the more you do it, the better you become, and you develop and mature as you do with anything. And you reach a point where you can see a progress from where you were at previously, and how you've progressed to a higher level, higher standard. And even your theological insights, the more you progress in that level too, you start to have a greater, broader and deeper understanding of the subject. And one such painting I did like that was a painting of the Way of the Cross, where Jesus meets his mother. What the Catholic Church traditionally calls the fourth station of the cross. Jesus meets his afflicted mother. It's not in the Gospels, yet we have this tradition which came from somewhere. Obviously it probably was an oral tradition from the
Yeah.
earliest times, from the time of the apostles,
Mm.
when they watched the Mother of God make the sorrowful way of the cross in Jerusalem after his resurrection. She revisited those places and paused and kissed the ground. We know this from visionaries or mystics like Catherine Emmerich or Mary of Agreda. So we have this tradition
Yeah.
of the way of the cross. When I did that painting, I had an absolute ball just creating this scene of the Via Dolorosa with a vast multitude of emotional, charged scene,
Yeah.
and the juxtaposition of anger and hate with sorrow and affliction and suffering. It was like
Sure.
the whole human condition all in one painting. And I
Yes.
used a lot of real life faces to get a ethnicity and real emotion in faces. And when people see that, it really does move some people to tears, and that really helps people enter into the mystery or the moment that it attempts to depict.
Yeah. It's a beautiful painting, that one. Now, most creative artists will be able to describe the feeling when you're online with whatever the truth is that's flowing through you. You just know, and it goes, and there's a focus. Do you experience that in the sense that you're in the sandbox, but there's some places in the sandbox which are really truly sacredly inspired? When you touch those, do you feel it? Do you know I'm on here?
Oftentimes I see it after after the fact. It's almost like you're amazed and surprised by something that you didn't even anticipate or intend, but there it is, and it actually is an improvement on the concept or the idea that you maybe initially had. It's actually better than what you anticipated or expected, and that surprise that is always, continues still, that you're amazed by what you have just been able to been part of that process of creating. But there is always that sense. I think anyone who really has a gift, an extraordinary gift, is humbled by that and realizes that there's a higher power that is behind that. You're just the you're just, like I sometimes say, like you're directing traffic.
Yes,
But
exactly.
it's coming from somewhere else, and you recognise that, and it's humbling, because you think, who am I that God would? Then God can choose anyone, and He does choose different souls for different tasks, and I'm just that little cog in the wheel, or the blunt pencil in His hand, but He's the one that's holding the pencil. I'm the conduit, is the word I'm looking for.
That's right. Yes.
And we're all and we're all that in various ways to other souls and people. And so if I can do that in an artistic sense and open a window, which sacred art in its strictest form, and the definition of an icon, for example, is a window into heaven,
And
the Finestri Coeli.
And that's a good place for us to finish, because we're going to speak next week, I hope. And we're going to speak about icons.
I would love to do that.
Thanks, Tommy. You've been watching Harmony and Diversity, and we'll be back next week, and we'll be speaking with Tommy Canning. Thanks for watching.
Baha'u'llah, Shanti Om.